Welcome to the Soulish Podcast. My name is Whitney Apke, and I'm the host of the Soulish Podcast. And today I have a wonderful, most beautiful, and lovely guest, Lindsay Mac. You do such amazing work, and we met because you found me through my brother, and then we worked together for a little bit. And it was just so cool to get to know you and the work that you do. And I'm so grateful to have you on my podcast. It's such a privilege and an honor to have you. Because of the work you do such deep work. So we'll get into your bio in just a second, but thank you so much for coming on to the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Whitney. I'm really excited to be here.
So let's get into your bio because I want people to know what you do and how long you've done it. You've actually been working for over 12 years. As a guide for helping people reconnect and remember their truest nature and deepest roots for everlasting change, which is amazing. You use techniques that dive deep into the subconscious and physiology of a person, such as somatic psychotherapy, mindfulness, breath work, inner child work, and trauma specialized techniques as well that bring mind, body, spirit coherence. And that's something we so desperately need. So I think it's just you're so timed in your incarnation. You just picked an amazing incarnation time. Go you. And I want to honor you for the work you do because it's so important. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing what you do and your journey with us. Hello, Soulish Tribe. So I know that I'm not alone and always feeling thirsty. Even though I hydrate throughout the day, I'm always feeling that I need more water, especially after those cycling classes. My friends James and Mark over at Zaka have the perfect solution. Zaka's Hydration and Liverade is the #1 recovery and hydration solution for working out, jet lag, or drinking, maybe just a little too much. Zaka uses herbs such as Japanese raisin as well as other natural and fermented ingredients that are safe and without artificial flavors. Zaka is unique because it doesn't just replenish what your body needs, but also supports your body's natural ability to recover. It's 2 very, very yummy and berry chewable tablets that you can put under your tongue or chew up and swallow. Go to Zaka.com, that's ZACA.com, and use promo code SOULISH15 to get 15% off of your order.
Yeah, it's really great to be here. And yeah, I think I picked a good time. Whether that was
you did
purpose,
too.
was it on purpose or not? I don't know yet, but yeah.
I think it was. I think it was purposeful. I think you're that badass.
Into the wildest, craziest scenario you can find, and let's do some work.
Yeah, let's help the world heal. Yeah, I think your journey is also really amazing. We've gotten into that as we've talked and chatted, and I think it's really I love hearing the journey of other healers and how they found their craft and their niche of no, I'm fucking fantastic at what I do. This is my jam. This is what I excel at, and this is how I can best help people. And I just think that's amazing. So what led you to the work that you do now? How did you discover it, and how did you get into it now?
Yeah, I love this. If you would have asked me even a dozen years ago, what did you want to be? It was I was in this space of being so consumed in trauma. I was I want to be a heavy duty mechanic. That was my my thing. And I say that to people now and they're you wanted to do what? And because it's so not me. And so it was just oh, I'm just gonna do the thing that my dad thinks I need to do, or yeah, so it's been such a amazing journey getting to the place that I am today and doing the things that I do today. So at about 25 years old, the ripe old age of 25, I was diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And this big long I'm young. I already had a couple kids at the time. I get this big long diagnosis and I'm just what does this even mean? And my doctors in Canada, they were like, well, you're like, here's your prescription drugs to take. Like, this one's for anxiety, this one's for depression, this one's for emergencies, this one's for, panic attacks. And I'm just like, and I'm like, and I remember like leaving and walking out with like, it felt like a handful of prescriptions, and, go fill them at the pharmacy. And I never filled them. And I was, I definitely got my father is very holistic. So I definitely got like a chunk of that from him. But I had like a father who's very holistic, and then a mother who's very like Western medicine. Yeah, pro Western medicine. And so I kind of got this combination, but tended to veer a little bit more to my father. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, I don't even take a Tylenol. Like, I'm not going to go and like fill all of this. Like, I have no idea what they even are. So I, go home and start researching, and I'm like, ooh, like they really didn't look good. And so, and I already had like some previous information around it. And I thought to myself, like, there's got to be something else. Like, there's got to be another solution to what I'm experiencing internally. And my whole life was chaotic. Like, I was really locked in addictions. I was really suffering. Like, I was having like full on like PTSD moments on the floor, curled up in the fetal position, sobbing, like frozen, stuck, like just, it was really intense. And of course my children were suffering from that, and they became the little, like I remember having a moment one time, just looking into their eyes and being like, I have to change this for the next generations to come. Like, I have to start doing some of this work, even though I have no clue what that is. Right. And so I started my journey with therapists, and we have like a public system. So we have like a public health system. So I started in the public health system because it was cheaper, and it was, and I was like, okay, let's go do like the thing and see how it goes. And they'd be like, all right, like, we're going to check you into your 6 to 9 appointments with your therapist. And I was like, okay. And you would sit there, and, it was all essentially talk therapy. And I quickly started to realize, like, this is not working for me. I don't know what it is that I need yet, but this is not working. And meanwhile, outside of that, I was doing, I was starting to meditate. So I was getting into like meditation. It was like, it was connecting really quickly for me. It's like anything from transcendental to traditional, to more like traditional Hindu and Buddhist meditations, to guided meditation, to visualization. Like, I was kind of like in this whole realm, and quickly started teaching meditation because it was just my jam. And I was starting to do meditation, starting to realize that I would go to therapists, and I started to, okay, I'm going to give this therapist, at least 3 to 6 session try, because like, they're not going to be able to like give me what I need on the first session. So I'm going to give them a little bit of time. And I would just come up short over and over again. It was like, I would get a quick fix on like a surface level, and then I'd be right back to the same behaviors, right back to the same beliefs. And I'm like, something's got to give here. Like, there's got to be somebody who can take me deeper. And it was like, they would hear my level of trauma, and they'd be like,
what do I do with that?
Like, how are we gonna like, and then it was just like this continuum of like telling my story over and over again. And like, and it was just like, again, like, just not getting anywhere that felt useful. And I went through a lot of therapists. Like, I really did. Like, I really tried hard. And again, a lot of the reason why I do what I do today. And
because how many people experience that? So many.
I like constantly, like, it is the most common thing that I get when people work with me. They sit down with me and they go, okay, but just so you know, I've already been to this and this and this kind of therapist, and I've tried this, this, and this, and I'm still suffering really deeply. And I'm like, right, because we're not deep enough, right? And so, like, we're not getting to the core wiring that is happening within you.
Yes.
So
important.
So important, right? And so just to give just like a like a little hint of like, I experienced the first 10 years of my life, sexual abuse. There was a lot of violence in my home. There was a lot, like on multitude of levels. I went through group homes, foster homes. I was on the streets at 16 years old for about 7 months.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I would say like hanging out on the streets, even though there was like a, very much survival mode and a deep impact of that, there was also a sense of like, I just want to be free. Like I can't keep being in these systems. Right.
Right.
And that's been my whole journey, is like, I just see the crazy matrixy systems, and I'm like, and I always have balked at them. I balked at them in my family system. I balked at them in the school system. And like, people just didn't really know what do we do with Lindsay? Like, what do we do with her? And, it essentially landed me on the streets at 16 years old. I was in a foster home, and my social worker, we had a big meeting with like the main social worker. There was a bunch of them sitting there, and basically they told me like, you're no longer allowed to be in social services, and like, we can either drop you off at the teen shelter or you can just leave. And like, that was that's what they said to me. They're like, just like, bye, like, see you later. I was like, okay. And so, again, spent a few months on the streets, and learned a lot of things. And, shortly after that, found myself pregnant and, starting a family. And that really shifted a lot of things for me. In between that, 6 months pregnant, I lost my brother. Like, there was just like, it was just a very chaotic moment. And so I was full to the brim, overflowing.
Yeah. Like, I don't think most people experience that. I think that's really like unique to you. And that's even some things that I didn't even know about you. Like, in all the talks that we've had, like, that's the first I'm hearing about that. It's amazing that you went through that you survived, that you've even come to where you are now to do this work. Like, how amazing is your journey?
Well,
Wow.
and this is the thing that I love, is that like, I mean, gosh, working through the deep trauma, which I did end up finding a therapist who was somatically trained, and she saved my life. Like, she legit saved my life. I was like at the end, and another therapist who I happened to run into was like, Lindsay, I can't work with you, but I really would recommend this lady. And I was like, and she's like, she does this technique called Hakomi. And I'm like, Hakomi, like, what is that? And so
Yeah, I don't even know
thought
what
it
that
was
is.
weird. I thought it was weird. I Googled it. And so Hakomi is a form of somatic psychotherapy. I'm also trained in it now. And so she does this form of Hakomi. I looked it up. I still didn't quite get what it was, but I was just like, so desperate. And I started seeing her privately. And like I said, she changed my life, and she taught me how to go into the body, and taught me how to move the trauma and re-regulate the trauma that was stuck in me for a long, long time. Like, probably like in utero birth, like there was a lot of pieces, like those pre-memory pieces, which I love to talk about, which I will soon. And
Yes.
I'm
writing that down.
yeah, do it. I'll touch on it because it's one of my favorite subjects right at this moment anyways. And so, yeah. And typically the thing about me that I find that I really stand out when it comes to other therapists is that I have walked it. I have walked through it. I have been through it. I have been through high levels of trauma where basically like I shouldn't be, sometimes people think like I shouldn't be in the place where I'm at today and have the life that I have today. And so I 100% know that it is possible to attain and to achieve the life that you really want to live, regardless of what has happened to you.
Yes.
And I'm so passionate about sharing that. I'm so passionate about like when somebody sits in my office and they like list off like their bigger traumas, I'm like, the more traumatized, the more I like you. Like, I'm just like, it's just like an automatic for me. I'm just like, I can't wait to guide you within yourself so you can find that center again and then everything becomes possible. And all the things that you thought were choiceless, because really trauma leaves us in a really, really like choiceless place. And so so we believe that growing up. And so I always say the opposite of trauma is choice.
Yeah.
And when we start to believe that we have choice, it's like, yeah, everything shifts. So
That's going to be in the promo clip. Trauma, choice.
yes.
Love that. Wow. Can you say that one more time for everybody?
Totally. So when we are traumatized, we are stuck in a place of being choiceless. And the opposite of trauma is choice.
God, we need to let that sink in. Because I know, like, even like the micro traumas, right, can bring you to a place of limitation and hindrance and block where you think there is no other choice other than what I feel. There is no other choice than what I think. There is no other choice than the words that I speak, or how I see this situation. Like, there's no other way to see it other than this. Like, you're so limited. And just even in that, like, if people who are listening haven't experienced like the level of trauma you have, or even sexual trauma or anything like that, like myself, I mean, to be honest, I haven't experienced sexual trauma except for repressed sexual, which is sort of ish trauma. But it's like but I haven't experienced it to the level like you have. And yet I know in the little ways that I've experienced some sort of micro traumas that I can have a limited perspective on something or limiting belief about something. And that is huge, even for people that haven't experienced huge levels of trauma in their life, to realize that the opposite of trauma is choice. You have a choice, you have freedom. Freedom does really exist. That's amazing.
Yeah. So let me throw this at you, okay? Because you'll like it. You're gonna love it. Okay. So because again, some people here are like, well, okay, so first of all, I want to say the definition of trauma, okay? And because sometimes people assume, okay, like they can look at my story and be like, well, obviously Lindsay's traumatized, like it makes sense.
Right.
And just like you talked about, we actually have these like, and I don't like to judge whose trauma is more and who has,
Right.
However, trauma isn't necessarily the event that happened to you. It is how your nervous system was able to cope with the situation.
Ooh, that's so good.
Isn't it so good? I love it. Like it's just like
Ooh,
so
that's so good.
one of my favorite teachers, Dr. Peter Levine, who is responsible for he created somatic experiencing, who I just love. Like that is the reality of trauma. So this is sometimes too, Whitney, why we get like two siblings who will grow up in the same household with the same parents who have different experiences. So sometimes a nervous system is a little bit more developed or a little bit different or reacts differently to different situations. And so one sibling might be like I can even say this about me and my sister. I'm like, oh my gosh, like our childhood was like, and she's like, well, I mean, it wasn't the greatest, but it wasn't that bad. Like, and we have these like different responses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so again, yes, like when you start to look at like, and it's not to negate that big things when trauma happens or when big events happen, that doesn't mean that it's not traumatizing, but it's about how the nervous system responds to it and where it takes that fight or flight. Okay, it's going to take that fight or flight response, and it basically locks it up or freezes it up, and then somewhere in the body it gets stored. And now when it gets stored in the body, what happens is the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. So autonomic nervous system, meaning like all the things that happen automatically. So when I take a sip of water, I'm not like, okay, throat, now swallow, bring it to my stomach, move it. Like I'm not telling it what to do. These are all things that are automatic that are happening, right? I don't have to tell my arm to move. It just moves, right? So when we have trauma that's locked in, the autonomic nervous system doesn't have the capacity to function at its peak. And when it's not functioning at its peak, all sorts of things start to shut down and get funky. So then we're starting to look at different kinds of diseases, different kinds of issues, which of course Western medicine isn't super great with. They're just, here's a pill and here's another pill and here's another pill that's probably going to impact your nervous system even more. And we'll just keep taking care of the symptoms. And so,
Yep.
and so,
Man.
Yeah.
I'm having so many thoughts.
I know.
It's amazing because like we don't realize the impact of coasting unhealed, coasting with stored trauma, just coasting through life because it's too painful to feel it again, to bring it up. It's too, and also like our ability to even recognize what is stored, you know? Sometimes we can mentally get over things and you're like, okay, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. You know, like after a relationship, right? That's a great example. Like you break up and you're just kind of like, okay, I got this. Like I'm good. I'm single. Woo, you know, like, and you just kind of pedal through, right? But yet things that were said, things that happened in the relationship, if it was really unhealthy, low-key abusive, maybe like words were said, things were done that were not healthy, that were not beneficial, supportive. We kind of just like, that was then, this is now, but we never actually go and deal with it and release it. And that can actually be stored in your body, like you said, and then impact you later, not just in your health, but even how you go into your next relationship or how you see yourself. And that's huge. Like my theme this week has been self-love. I think you saw that on my stories. I don't know what it is, but this week it's been just like this huge focus on self-love. And I think that's one of the main ways, right? To go in, even to go to someone like you, is that's self-love. That's knowing, hey, something's funky. You know, I need to heal that. And that's huge.
Yeah,
Man.
absolutely. And when we have stored trauma, especially from childhood, our automatic response when any sort of pain in our physiology, whether it be physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, we tend to just do the same thing with it. So another one of my lovely people that I learned from is Irene Lyons, and she's a brilliant woman, and she always uses this. I recently heard her talk about like when you stub your toe, for example. Okay, let's just use like a physical pain. You stub your toe. Your nervous system actually wants to take a moment to be like, oh, that really hurt. And everybody's going to be different with how they respond. Somebody might cry, somebody might need to yell, somebody might need to be like, like everybody's going to have a different response. But your nervous system has been kind of like shocked a little bit, like, oh, that really, really hurt. And then it's going to want to take care of itself. Pause, put a Band-Aid on, make sure the toe isn't broken, whatever the situation is, right? Yeah, right. And so we don't do those things though, right? Like, what is it that we do? We stub it and then we're like, but I'm just trying to get out of the house quick. So I'm going to keep getting out of the house quicker. I just have to do this next thing, or I'm just going to suck it up and just pretend that it doesn't hurt, or and we do all these different things. And essentially, again, there's another stress response stored in the system. And so we continue it. And this is, again, where we start to see complex PTSD, because we're looking at like where somebody was traumatized early on and then it just continues, right?
Yeah. Is that because we don't fully cycle through? And that's part of the problem, is that you're not fully cycling through what just happened. You're stopping it at the pain point.
Exactly. Well, and we're not going through like essentially what needs to happen is you get a sympathetic charge, right? And then you want to go into the parasympathetic. Now, parasympathetic has more than one branch. So I just want to name that, but I'm talking about more of like that parasympathetic, like rest, digest, heal, like those kind of aspects, not so much the sort of dorsal part of like the shutdown or the collapse. So when we go into the sympathetic, we want to have that parasympathetic come in as well. So we have these like dual piece, and I always look at it like a circle. So the circle gets completed. But if we have that sympathetic and then stop it, right? We stop it when it's in some form of, again, some sort of stress response, and we just stop it. it's locked up, right? And again, where does it store? It stores in the body. And so let's look at this idea of so I like to just macro things. Okay. So let's just look at our world in general right now. It's a little wild. And if we look at this idea of if we take this is just my opinion, I'm finding that my generation is our generation is the first generation to really shift and get the ball rolling. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Into, instead of generational trauma, into generational healing. That does not mean that people before us didn't start the ball rolling, because they had to, because where else are we going to get it from? So
right.
I also believe that there's just a different energy that is coming into the earth. I feel it, I know it, I see it, it's for sure there. And so as we continue to go into more healing, the more babies that are born now are really bringing in this newer energy. And so to go back to previous generations, a lot of us, especially in North America, we were born into families where parents were not attuned to themselves. Okay. This is not a fault. This is not a blame. This is just the way that humans have been. And I always talk about this. I always like to just throw a little disclaimer out. When we do the work, it is not about shifting into parent blame. Yes, you may have to process anger around your parents. Yes, you may have to, maybe not have a relationship with them if that's the case for you. However, it's about just looking at the reality of it right now. Okay.
Just acknowledging.
Yes. And we are once once you're an adult, you are now responsible for the stuff that is within you. And in fairness, our parents and our grandparents, and they just got it down the line too, right? It just came generationally. So again, looking at generational trauma. And so we have parents who are not attuned to themselves, main caregivers who are not attuned to themselves. They're typically, because again, especially in North America, we just are so intellect of the mind is everything. So we're so focused up here, and we've forgotten about so many other pieces. But we get this new little baby, and when this new little baby comes out, and this can also be in utero, we get this new little baby who comes out, and the mother in I want to say in most cases, but I understand that it's not in all cases, she isn't quite attuned to herself. So how then can she be attuned to the child's needs? So what, and these can just be small things like underfeeding or overfeeding, or the baby's too hot or the baby's too cold, so we're not necessarily looking at sure, obviously some babies go through a lot more things, parents feeling a lot more stress, whatever the case is, not being attuned to themselves. As soon as the child learns that okay, main caregiver isn't super attuned to me, that nervous system of that baby already starts to do things, already starts to protect itself, already starts to go, okay, this part of me, or this part of my need. Now, of course, I'm saying it like it's a thought, but of course it's not a thought. This part of me, or this part of my need, it can't be here, or it can't exist in this system that I'm in. So it gets put aside, right? And slowly but surely we put them aside, and then we pick up all the I ams, right? We pick up all the I am Lindsay, and I am a good girl, and I am a, and we start to pick those up, and before you know it, we have a whole bunch of layers on us. And then all the other things that happen to us, of course, right? And all the other things that happen during childhood, right? And so what I like to say is that if we're going to get into that root wiring, into that, because I'm all about taking people to the root, it's let's go to the root. So we want to look at bring people essentially somatically, mindfully back into their physiology, and at least get them to sense what it was like in their body before those aspects, before the unattuned parent couldn't attend to them. And then we're remembering our true essence. We're really tapping into our true essence and our oneness, essentially. So So it's a little bit of,
Amazing.
it's a little bit of like let's start to peel the layers back. And again, when people come and they're like, they're like, okay, no, Lindsay, I just have this issue. Like my spouse is the problem, and I just need you to help me to fix them, or like make it so I'm not so frustrated with them, or like, and I'm like, well, we're probably going to go back into your first relationships. Like, let's go, which again, caregivers, parents, right? Like, let's go look at your first relationships. Like, no, that's not the issue. And no, like that's the past, and we leave the past in the past and we don't look at that. And I'm like, when your past is affecting your present moment, then we need to go back there. And it becomes a subconscious undercurrent that we have no idea about, that's been running the show all the time. So we got to tap into that subconscious undercurrent, and we have to figure out what are the aspects. And the thing is that when we go through the body is the bridge to the soul. So if we stay here, if we stay in the mind and only focus in the mind and try to do talk therapy or try to do whatever modalities that don't deepen us into our physiology, good luck with spirituality. Like, good luck with spirituality, because in my opinion, it will only just be a bypass. We have to go deep into the physiology.
Oh, there's so much bypassing happening. Like, so much, even within my own self. Like, it's really easy to bypass. And I actually had a moment earlier this week, which I think was kind of like the springboard into the theme for me, that quickly shifted. And I had all these things start to come up of like past relationships, of even the future, thoughts of the future, of things not happening or whatever, or not working out, whether it's purpose or relationship, partnerships, friendships. And I am in transition in my life right now, and I can feel that, like I'm transitioning. But it's funny how it was, I had a moment, Lindsay, where I I could either stuff it down because I'm trying to go to sleep. Like, I'm in bed, head on pillow. I don't want to snot cry right now. Like, it's just not what I want to do. And I like it, just tears started coming and I had a choice. Do I stop it or do I let it flow? And I just decided to let it flow, to the point where I couldn't like lay down anymore because I can't breathe. And so I just started to like release and talk through that with myself, like speak truth over what was coming up, and releasing it, doing the best I can to release it, releasing it in my body, releasing it in my emotions, my fears, my thoughts of the what ifs of the future, and things that are going to go down the tube, like, just all the things, right? In all areas of life that were coming up for me. And that's something that I think, even it's really easy for us to stop ourselves at that point, even, much less than go to somebody that can actually do the work with us, like you. But I just, even that is so important, just to even allow, like we're not even at that place, most people, that we allow ourselves to feel it in its entirety, like not half-ass it, but like literally feel it, to the point where it's like, I can't breathe and I hope I don't get sick because I have so much snot, you know? So I just think it's so important just to even start there on the allowing, but there's so much bypassing happening. And I felt that in religion too. Like when I grew up Christian, as you know, and I felt like there was so much bypassing, even with just like little things like forgiving people for wronging you. It's like, so I'm just going to forgive and then just act like nothing happened, and not, I can't use wisdom, because if I use wisdom and have them earn trust with me, as a Christian leader, or a leader among this group of people, I am shunning them, I am punishing them, I haven't forgiven them then. It's like the way that you are supposed to walk out forgiveness, at least in my experience with Christianity, it was like you have to still welcome them with open arms, and still share your heart, and yet they're in the room, and this is somebody that has sought you out to destroy you, and you're like, okay, I'll forgive, and like not even address that. I'll just like choose to forgive, okay, I'll choose to forgive. But like actually going into like, how this affected me, like this betrayal or whatever it is, right? And I feel like we do that in spirituality too. And even A Course in Miracles sometimes I feel like is bypassing. I don't know if you know that work either, but it's like everything is an illusion. And I agree with that to a certain extent, but that doesn't mean that you then just bypass what happened, and how you feel and how it impacted you, that
Abs-
doesn't
yeah.
mean that, yeah, that you can just like cut it off, because then you're stopping yourself at that pain point and you're not actually continuing. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that same thing. Like we're using more of like the mind to
yeah,
walk our way through something or to tell ourselves. And like if there is not a mind body connection, then you're not gonna shift it spiritually. So the more that we look at, okay, and like we still have our limbic system, we still have our lizard brain that is like our egos is like keeping us alive, it's moving us forward, like it's
yeah,
keeping us alive, it's watching for danger, it's checking for things, it's like, and so we have to go into that. So when an injury comes in, where it's like somebody's purposely trying to take you out, or somebody has harmed you, walk through the feelings around it first,
yeah,
and go deep into the physiology. And chances are, like I typically find that people are like, oh gosh, like this reminds me of when my mom did this thing, or when my uncle was like that, or like, or
yeah,
my sibling, or like, and typically there's something that we're being reminded of. And when we let the body actually process it, we connect in deeper to our core, into our center, and we're able to understand then how we want to move forward. And from what I've seen, it's not with cruelty. It's not with anything. It's like sometimes there's boundaries there that are like, you know what? Like, I just don't need this energy in my life, and I'm just gonna go another way. And like
right,
that's cool. Like that's cool. And you're allowed to do that, right? Or
right,
sometimes we do have to stand up for ourselves. Like, it's not okay that you treat me this way, and I don't like this. And so sometimes that is part of our journeys. We can't just reach. I think sometimes with the bypassing, there's this idea, and there's like these really beautiful, different kinds of spiritual writings and spiritual terms, like even just like letting go,
hmm,
just let it go is like, well, okay. Like I joke about this with my partner all the time, because because we just like, him and I just do so much deep work, and he'll come up and be like, oh, like I'm really processing this thing. And I'll just be like, just let it go. And we always laugh, and we're always just like, it's like this joke that we have, because it's like no, we have to actually move through it first. And like
hmm,
if you've done a large chunk of work, and like again, these terms are based in where you're at on your journey. Like
yeah,
I'm not going to just tell like a brand new client in my office to just let it go. But if somebody comes up to me and I know that they've done some really good, really deep work, I may say that to them. I may be like,
yeah,
okay, like, this, like, that you can just drop in and just allow it, let it go, or, allow it to flow, whatever. And again, but it depends, but we really have to connect in, and most of
yeah,
us walking around still do not have like full capacity nervous system health. And
yeah,
the nervous system regulation is the key to spirituality. Like, I hate to burst people's bubbles, but like, you're really not going to use your mind to get to spirituality. There has to be mind body connection, which then invites the spirit in deeper. And we're ever evolving. So like, it's not like there isn't like this destination, like, Kay Whitney, like, we're going to get you all primed up, full nervous system capacity, and now you have arrived. And like, now you're just good to go, and you can walk around like Jesus, and you're like all cool. And so I always think of Jesus just because I feel
yeah.
like he's just
Halo.
enlightened. And so, and so that's not necessarily the case. We have to we have to go deep within. And every time, I always say, the deeper we go, the deeper it gets. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
I've been doing some really deep work within myself, whether, yes, when my it's probably about eight or 9 or 10 years ago now, where the trauma therapist came in that really, really was amazing and really changed my life. And when even prior to that though, like I was still doing some deep work and, what, like just trying to find it on my own. But let's just say a decade of really deep work. I haven't hit the, like, I've arrived. Everything's good. Like there's way less suffering. There's way more like capacity that I have. Like there's way more beauty in the world that I see, but I still haven't hit this, like, nothing bothers me and I'm just all zen and like everybody is like, which sometimes I do have to admit, I do try to achieve that in my own bypass. I'm like, sometimes things will come my way and I'm like, okay, Lindsay, better, right? Like you should be, or like this shouldn't be impacting you, or like, and I'm like, all right, I'm still this dense human, like I'm still there.
And you're gonna be
Yeah, like,
until you pass.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think it's the same thing within the body, right? Like I'm kind of gearing myself up right now for like a full, like total body cleanse of like the, parasites or organisms that are currently residing in me, that I would not like to be there, down to like a heavy metal cleanse, to liver cleanse, kidney cleanse. Like it's just like a full body reset. But like you need to actually do that like at least, I don't know what doctors recommend, but or like Eastern doctors, but like you need to do that a couple times, in your life. Like it's not just like a one and done is what I'm trying to say. Like you can't just like do this once and think you're good like forever. Like I should have actually been probably doing this like for my whole life. I should have been doing this every at least few years. But we're not taught to do that. Like again, like I think it's information, and that's kind of going back to even what you were saying about the generations before us is like they didn't have as much information as we have in this generation. Like and you're in my generation, we had that massive, that had like a huge butt computer. It was like you see the screen and it's like, yay big, but the butt of it is like big old butt. And so like, and then the dial-up internet, and you like wait for like 15 minutes for it to and and then you're on AOL.
And then somebody picks up the phone and you're like, no.
Yes. Right when you're dialing up, that's the worst. And I lived in a pastor's Christian home, so you can imagine, like, I rarely was able to successfully log on because everyone's calling my mama to pray, So I think it's just like we come from this age of we were kind of like the bridge between really no technology. Cell phones were as big as your purse, and like a dumbbell, and probably weighed very close to a dumbbell, and so and you had to like pull the thing out, and and then the cordless phones didn't exist. We had it was epic when we got the extension, the long cord that you could like go around the whole kitchen and maybe even the family room and still be talking, maybe you could reach the couch. So like we've had so much information in our generation, and that includes like how to heal and what actually is going on. And so I think it's so great that you're saying like it's not about blaming, because what they didn't know, they didn't know. And even if it was available, it wasn't integrated yet. And we're kind of in that generation right now where we're starting to integrate this type of healing, and actually allowing and not bypassing or stuffing down and all that. We're realizing what impact it has on all parts, right? Body, soul, and spirit. And so I just think it's amazing. Like, I think that's why you and I came, because I've always been about healing people. I'm not as educated as you are in all of the different ways, but I've always had such a heart to help people heal, because I knew what it was like to be in pain and to hurt and to have no one, or just not even know like how do I work through this, and how do I find freedom and healing so I'm not having these egoic awful, bitch moments for me, of like bitch fit. As a teenager, I'm like, I hate this. I hate that I talk to my brother this way, that I react to him this way. I hate that I retaliate to my mom, or my father. I don't like this. I don't like the look in their eyes, knowing like I'm hurting them because I'm hurting. I don't want to hurt anymore. I don't want to hurt people anymore. That's literally against my nature. I can feel it. And so just even that like is huge. So I love that we're talking about the somatic healing, and I want to go into as well, if you feel like that's good for you as well, of like some of maybe the practices that we can integrate, also going to people, but how can we just, even if we're not at a place where we can financially afford to go to somebody, or which I always believe that provision comes in for that, for whatever we need. But if we're not at a place where we're even yet open, what are some ways that we can begin to open up, and somatically, right? And feel things and start to at least acknowledge, right?
Yeah, and I think I I will say at this very moment that the one thing that's coming to mind is, again, coming back to when things happen, especially if they're like physical things, because they're a little bit easier to see. So sometimes the emotion, and again, it depends where you are. Sometimes the emotional stuff is a little bit harder to access depending on your own nervous system. But allowing yourself in moments of, like, let's even say you get in a little fender bender, or we're always doing things, or you stand up too fast and you whack your head on the corner of the open cupboard, or stuff like that. Pause and let yourself, and it's not just about pausing, because I want to name this, and this is really important, is that the reason why, or the all systems respond differently. So like we might have a chunk of people who need to like shake, and we might have a chunk of people who need to yell, or you might need to shake it one time and yell another time and cry this time. And like, so it depends like what's coming up for you. And I find sometimes people are a little more dominant in one or the other. Like I am a crier. Like when I process, I cry. Like I cry, and I cry hard.
Yep.
When I know other people who just shake. They shake when they do it, right? Like, and I want to name this too. Like in the shake, it's like it's an involuntary shake. So it's not necessarily, because I know sometimes we're trying. Sometimes we hear like, just shake it out and you're good. And I'm like, no, we haven't gone deep enough into the physiology yet. Like, yeah, we don't know.
Can't just shake it off like Taylor Swift.
Right. No, you definitely can't. And so it's like, so when we do go deep enough into the physiology, sometimes we do find like a vibration or a shaking that is literally involuntary that people will do. And so to come back to allowing yourself capacity to be able to withstand the moment of pain and not stuffing it away, breathe through it, is really important. Like, and sometimes I say like, you don't even have to control the breath, but just allow yourself to just breathe in the way that it wants to breathe. Okay. And like, because sometimes we hit, it was like, it might be rapid, but just allow that to happen and stay with it. Because what then starts to happen is the nervous system goes like, okay, like Lindsay was able to actually handle that, and like stay in her body and stay connected. Because when we do disassociate, the system, I'm going to talk about this too. When we do disassociate, the system goes like, oh gosh, like I'm in big trouble. So meditation is a good example of this. Breathwork can also be a good example. Meditation, if we are dominant in disassociation and our nervous system health isn't great, meditation is not a great idea if you're not doing embodiment meditation, because it's easy to do all the things, dimension travel and float around and la la la, into the ether you go. I also have firsthand experience with this. I could do very spiritual things very quickly when I did meditation. And granted, like I've always been able to, little part of my story that I'm always slightly shy about, just because of the work that I do, and sometimes I get looked at a little funny. But I started out, after teaching meditation, prior to getting into being a therapist, I was a medium. Like I connected with people who were crossed over, and that was the thing that I did, because it was just super easy for me to tap into that land. Now, what was happening was I was actually really disconnecting from the body. So I could do all the transcendental and hang out and like, and see cool things and meet cool things and, all the cool spiritual things that you could do. Yet my human life was suffering. And I was actually getting shorter and quicker, and I was addicted to meditation, and I wanted to meditate all the time. So I needed to build a bigger capacity. Now that I have a bigger capacity, I can do both, right? But I can stay connected to my body and also do the spiritual things. So
it's like escape,
yeah,
it's an escape.
exactly.
Escape for people that haven't watched Finding Nemo. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's the same for breath work. Sometimes breath work is too intense for people with really sensitive nervous systems. It actually can cause more injury. And so we have to be really careful and mindful of these things. I actually had, when I was teaching meditation, I actually had a girl go into full regress memory came back in. And like, I was not trained at the time. And I was like, thank God I had my own trauma experience to know what to do with her. But I was not, specifically trauma trained. And it was like, if we are going to work with other humans in a deep capacity, whatever that is, even yoga, even, like breath work, meditation, stuff like that, we must know our own selves first. And it's not like you must arrive first, because I don't want to say that, but it's like, know your own self, know the depth of how trauma maneuvers in the system and in the body, get some trauma informed information, and then carry on. Because again, like, not all modalities are going to be for all people. Once we change the nervous system capacity, then yes, we can use these things, cold dipping, like all the things, the saunas, and I do all these things, and I love all these things. We just have to be really mindful. When I get somebody in my class, and obviously, like, I'm trained to track people, like I'm literally trained to track other humans, like that's my job. And so I typically know when somebody walks into my breathwork class, I know what their nervous system level is at. And I will tell them, do not do the holotropic breathing. This is the breathing. This is the kind of breathing that you're going to do, because your nervous system is going to be way too overwhelmed. And so it's always monitored, right? And so, and I can sense it and feel it, because I'm all about the energy. So so to spin us back around to allowing our nervous system to have more capacity. So when there's a little bit of a physical injury or a paper cut or something like that, allow yourself to just feel into that. And what starts to happen is the nervous system goes like, okay, I actually can handle that. Now, next time something happens, I think I'm okay. I think that I can probably withstand that. And eventually what happens is the nervous system will go, hey, Lindsay, you remember when you were like 2 and that really crappy thing happened to you? I don't really want to hold on to it anymore. I think we're good enough and have a big enough capacity now to work through it. And the older things will start to release. And again, like, I mean, I don't recommend doing that stuff on your own. Like, really make sure that you're connecting with somebody when you're doing that.
Yes.
Even if it's just having somebody there sitting beside you with their hand on your back, like even that be enough nourishment to allow you to be able to stay with it. And what we do is we ride the edge. I always talk about riding the edge. So when we look at the nervous system, we kind of want to ride that edge of like, we have enough sympathetic charge, but we're just riding the edge of it and not sort of tipping over, because once we tip over, then we can get into like re-traumatization. So we want to just ride the edge of that and just continue to ride the edge. And sometimes it feels like, okay, I'm staying connected to my body, and then, oh, I feel like I want to do the old coping mechanism, whatever it is, right? Like whether it's stuff something in your mouth or, eating food is what I mean. Yes. Eat something or not feel it, like disassociate, or right. Like there's different coping mechanisms that people have. You might feel a slight inkling or a strong inkling to do that. But then if you can remember to just stay connected in the body. And this is why typically I like to, it depends on the person, is like, just show them that they actually have a center. Like, here is center. Here is what it is, right? And so,
Mhm.
again, I also want to name that I went from, like I was in a position, especially after I had 3 kids and my ex-husband ended up leaving. I was still in some like pretty intense trauma. And I was just kind of left for a little while with these kids and in a position of like, he was the main breadwinner. And, I did have a part-time job at the time, but I wasn't, bringing in like enough money to support us. And I was kind of just like, and kind of left with trauma and left in like a, single mom of 3 kids just for, a short period of time, came back in and did this thing. But it was like, I was left in that position and I always, always, always made it work to go to a paid therapist because I knew it was imperative. And and so sometimes I'm like, and I do work with a sliding scale because I do also understand sometimes the highest traumatized people are in the worst situations, and again, can't necessarily afford it, but I just believe that the money just comes. Like it was always
same.
it was just there for me. Like, it was just like, I was like, okay, universe, like I got to make this $150, therapy appointment. And it's like, here's some money for you, and it's an energy exchange. Right. And so sometimes I hear that and I'm like, okay, but just connect back into that place inside of you that knows that you need it and that drive, because of course it's our center. Right. And I have a drive that is like, it just feels like it's no other. Like I can never stop. Like I will never stop. Like I'm just like, just keep going. And no matter what it is, like if I hit a barrier, I'm like, I get excited. I'm like, all right, barrier, like, what are we doing now? Like, it's just like,
You like revel in 9 energy, like the graduation, like endings, new beginnings, like where you're right on the edge. You can't see it yet, but you're like, it's ending. There's a block. There's a wall. I can do this.
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
And the one thing about psychotherapy too is that one thing that I really felt was missing. And yeah, I've had some really cool training, but I'll tell you that the one thing that I say has been the biggest piece for me is doing my own work. That by far has taught me more than any of the training that I've done, even any of like the specialized trauma training that I've taken.
Yeah.
My understanding of trauma comes from the reality that I know it all the way through to my deepest core.
Right.
My ability to access the spirit through that is it, and guide people back into that, help them to remember it, whatever the case may be, is because of my own work. And I'm so, I get a little frustrated with the little traditional school systems who, pump out, I'm going to say this, I'm just going to say it, Whitney, who pump out psychologists and social workers and counselors, and they don't have to do their own internal work. It makes me wild. And it's like, why I'm so, it's another piece of what I'm so passionate about is like, okay, like, because we could be really like, we need these people. We need the healers. We need the wellness practitioners deeply. And when they go in and do the work internally, everything changes for them, for their clients, for their ability for their clients, for their how they retain clients, the depth they can take their clients, like everything changes for them. And sometimes I have a lot of friends who are in the psychology land, in the social work land, and they're just like, how do you do what you do without a degree? Because surprise, surprise, I don't have a traditional degree. I've done a lot of training, but I do not have a traditional degree because I did not need one. And it wasn't the way that my journey was. And they're like, how do you do it? Like, how do you do it without a degree? And I'm like, because it's kind of a lie. it's kind of a lie. Like that systemic way, sure, maybe it's made for some people, but that systemic way of being is not accurate anymore. And we're going to start switching out of that. But I mean, that's like a whole other topic that I could go on.
Topic. But
Yeah.
here's the thing that I love what you're saying, and this is my firm belief because I went to ministry school. I became a youth pastor. I was a youth pastor for several years, and then young adults minister, whatever you want to call it, leader. But for me, I tried even after that because I was like, I'm not doing what I want to be doing. It's not working as a pastor, as a licensed pastor who I thought I was going to be forever. It's not, I'm not doing what I'm meant to do. And so I even went to school for like a semester for a counseling major because I was like, how else am I going to do this? I want to reach more people than just within the church. I really want to make an impact. And it didn't work out. It was one, too expensive. It didn't align. There was something that just wasn't working out for me, but I felt so like if I'm not educated, then I don't have authority. But here's the thing is that whatever you overcome in your own life, you have authority to speak and to help people overcome in theirs. And so that's why for me, like you're 1000% educated, you're self-educated, you're spirit-led educated, whatever you want to say, right? Like for me, I used to actually think like, oh, I can't share that I'm like dealing with stuff in these different areas of my life that like I'm still healing because I have to arrive, right? I have to have already like made it. But that's what I love of what you're even also saying as someone who does really deep work, you still have deep work to do. I still have deep work and healing to do. But the difference is that I'm not just bypassing it. I'm not just letting it go. I actually live this. And that's what a lot of people I end up telling them because they're like, with Reiki or whatever, they're like, whoa, like I really like feel this. And I'm like, because I live it, like that's it. Like that's all. It's because I literally live this every day. Like I'm doing self Reiki, like probably more than I do Reiki on other people because it's so important to like be living what you actually are doing for people because you continue to learn. Like you continue your education, not just by taking a course or getting certified or licensed in certain areas of expertise, but you're also doing the work because then you're acquainted with it. You're acquainted with suffering in a way that somebody else is, and you can speak to that in a way that is empathetic, that is connected, that is holistic, and you know what it's like to walk through all parts of that. So I think that's why it's so important. Like who cares if you get a degree or not? It really matters. Like, have you done the work yourself? Have you walked through this at all? Do you even know what it feels like? Because you can have a degree all day long, and if you don't know what it feels like, you can't relate. It's
No,
completely separate.
100%. And I think that that's when we also start to look at societal traumas, right? Like how has the system, because I mean, obviously our environment is really important, and how has the system, created us to believe a certain thing. And like I said earlier, the one I have always balked at all the systems. It's like
Yep.
in my DNA to be like, that's weird. I don't like that. Why are you doing it that way? Like I've always been that way. Like my entire life. Like you talk to anybody and they're like, yeah, Lindsay doesn't do it the way that we all do it. like, yeah, because there's something not like it's like a spidey sense that I have. It's like there's something that isn't making sense. Just make it make sense to me, and perhaps I will think about maybe going along with it, but it doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any sense. And even if we look at a lot of other cultures besides even the Western culture that we live in right now, like how many were like the elders were the most important people. And why? Because they had experience and they had connection and they went through things. It wasn't because they did 10 years of schooling and got a doctorate. And it was just like, it's like we've forgotten about the importance of internal wisdom, and we've traded it for external knowledge.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and
it's all very disconnected too. It's just information, which I mean is helpful, but it's not everything. Experience is so much more. valuable.
100%.
Yeah.
And I mean, I for sure needed a combination of both of what I had,
Yeah.
like I did, like some of the intensive trauma training that I have taken has allowed me to, the reason why I was so good at it was because it was like connecting the dots for the work that I had already done internally. And now I have names for things. It was like,
Exactly.
okay, well, that's right. Okay, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic and the dorsal and like it was just like all of a sudden I could attach. Oh yeah, and that's why I understood it so well and was and essentially took off with it because I had it all inside of me already, and combining spirituality with psychotherapy is what I believe is a gap as well. And when we mix the spirituality in combination with the mind body, it's like trauma doesn't stand a chance. It just can't stay stuck anymore. And so, and again, I'm always looking, like, I'm just an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 18 years old. I've never worked for anybody. All I've done is just like, where's the problem? Find the solution. Where's the problem? Find the solution. Like, that's what I've done my entire life. And I'm like, I'm still doing it. I'm like, okay, where are there gaps? Where can we make this better? Where can we really deeply help people right to the root of their cause and help this world really, really shift?
Man, if you had become a mechanic, you would be like a bomb-ass mechanic. Just the way you work. You would have like had that shop running, and then you would have probably like created all these other shops and then like written a new handbook on the mechanics of how to work on a car. You would have rewritten the whole system. People would actually not be like, gypped or anything. You would have hated Pontiacs. Pontiacs are awful. Like, yeah, I can see you being a really bomb-ass mechanic, but I'm really happy you chose to do what you do now. I want to get into the pre-memory because I find that fascinating. And I think, gosh, this was actually brought to me when I was 23. So like, how long ago was that? 15-ish years ago? No, 13-ish years ago. And it was by somebody who told me their story that they were always afraid of driving in the rain. And they didn't know why they had this fear of driving in the rain. And one day they asked their mom about it. Like, I have this crazy fear and I literally can't leave the house when it rains because I can't get into the car. It like they literally have like the full body experience of like, like they physically can't do it. They emotionally, mentally, it's like everything shuts down as soon as they even think to get in the car to drive when it's raining, like very real. And she just so happened to tell her mom, and she was like probably in her 20s, 30s at this point, and she's telling me this when she's in her 60s, so like 30 years later. And she actually asked her mom when she was still living, like, Mom, I have this thing, I don't understand it, like I don't know why I have this experience every time. And she's like, oh, when I was pregnant with you, I got into a car accident by driving in the rain, and I almost lost you, and I almost lost myself, my life. And she was like, oh. And then she's like trying to figure it out because there wasn't this idea that when you're in utero, that everything that your mom experiences, you actually are inadvertently experiencing emotions, thoughts, like everything, energy, the physiology of it, all the chemical reactions that happen, hormone reactions that happen, so much. And so she was telling me that because she was seeing a pattern that I had even as a Christian. Like, she was seeing a patterning in just when we were talking about things, that she was like, I think that goes deeper. I think that goes into utero, maybe, or like maybe even further back. And she was talking as if she believed in reincarnation, but we never even talked about that because that wasn't a belief. We believe in heaven and hell. But it was funny how she was talking to me now that I think back, and I'm like, she was kind of like on the fringe as a Christian, but that was my first exposure to pre-memory things, and to even think that anything that happens in utero, would affect me now in the way that I think about things or react to things. So I find it really fascinating, and I'd love to get into that because it's just
It's so
I
cool, right?
it impacts us, I think, more than we think.
Absolutely. And it goes back to the point too about like where when we don't have a parent that is attuned to themselves, whether, whether, and again, because they're all moms that are carrying babies, whether it's like, whether that is, the mom in utero or afterwards, right? And that all
Mhm.
impacts. I actually have a similar story in terms of I was pregnant with my first child, 6 months pregnant with her when my brother died and he drowned. And my daughter still to this day has a fear of water. And like,
Mm.
and she's just like, this is so weird. And I'm like, well, not really. And and of course, like, yes, it what my behaviors after that happened would have also impacted her. So I would even argue that the mother's like that traumatic event of the mother with the rain, when it would rain, I would question what would happen to mom, what would happen if it was raining again and she was driving and like, right. And
Yes.
same for me. My brother drowned in the river here, and I became really like, I didn't want her near the river's
Yeah.
edge. Like I was just like,
Yep.
unless I was like literally holding her hand. And so there was also that impact. However, it was like right from the beginning, right? Like going swimming, like it was so early on, right?
Mhm.
And so we start to see how these things impact, and we start to get into whether it's generational or past life stuff. Now, I have a little rule around past lives, just a little, like, just it's not that we don't want to explore it, just deal with this life first. And so I always say that, and it's not that you can't have it or go back there or like and understand, and sometimes
Right.
certain things will just automatically take us back there. It's not like a rule of thumb. However,
Right.
if it's still here in this life today, then it's still in this life. It's
Right.
no longer a past life because it's here.
It's
And
current.
so and
Yeah.
so and also talking about generational stuff, right? Like, so
Yes.
we start to get into generational patterns. So another example of generational patterns would be, so my mom's side of the family is from India, and she went from, so my great grandmother, she never drove, because I don't even think many women in India at that time even drove, or if they were allowed to.
Yeah.
My grandmother, who came over from India to England, she drove, but I believe she was quite a bit older when she got her license, and she stopped driving in like her mid 50s because it was just like too much for her. My
Wow.
mother, my mother, who was actually, my mother was born in England, came over to Canada. She didn't get her license till she was, in her later 20s. I also magically had this really crazy fear of driving. It was just like my brain couldn't comprehend how you could get in a vehicle, and like how can you actually get in this really big box and drive it without dying? Like, it was this really inherent fear. And so
Wow.
my funny story that I like to tell people is that I actually got, I'm a paraglide pilot. So I actually got my paragliding pilot's license before I got my driving license. That was less scary. Running off a mountain and flying was less scary than driving in a vehicle.
I love that.
And so
Oh,
I
that's so funny.
so funny, right? And so it was also really tied up in generational trauma
Man.
with my with like, why weren't women allowed to drive, and what was the story with my great grandmother, and what's the
Yeah.
story with my grandma, and like all the fear that they constantly had. And I mean, I remember driving with my grandma and my mom, and they were always just like, like always on edge, like the thing's gonna happen and the next thing's gonna happen, and like kind of like, yeah. And so it was just, like it was in my DNA, that's for sure. And like,
So funny.
I mean, I obviously drive perfectly fine now. I drive all sorts of things, motorbikes and cars and whatever, but
A
like
woman of so many skills and abilities.
you have to live life, like when you're,
Yeah.
it's like when you're so trapped in trauma for such a
Oh,
large
yeah.
chunk of your existence. It's like when
Yeah.
you start to get free of that, it's just like, what else can I do? Like, what else is really cool that I can explore? And so I'm such a freedom seeker, like all the
Because
way.
there's no limitations. There's nothing
Exactly.
to fear. That's amazing.
Exactly
So,
that.
so you would recommend then that, because I know like past life regression is a huge kind of thing in the spiritual community. to get into your past lives, which I think there's value there. Like I've done maybe 3 sessions with my friend who's been on the podcast, Daniel, the past life regressionist. Um, and it's definitely been like amazing to see the even like the lifetimes of patterning of specifically in relationships, and also poverty mindset for me was a huge one of lack and scarcity. But it's so important to actually address what's happening in this life because that's why you're here, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think that I mean, I never want to put anybody, any modalities down, because at
Right.
different times they work for us in different ways
Oh
and in
yeah.
different areas, right? And
Right.
and for me, like, I think it can be fun and it can be cool and it can bring understanding. It's just not a bypass. So like, if
Yeah.
you go into your past and okay, let's just take like poverty. If you find that, like, oh gosh, like, look at that lifetime, I barely had anything and I was in deep survival mode, and same with that one, and same with that one, and then you bring it up here, and then you're like, well, I guess I don't need to go into my physiology around the money struggles that my parents had then, or how it was like when I grew up. Like, if again, if that's the case for you, because I've looked past that and I've done the work in the past life, right? Sometimes,
Right.
again, we use it as a bypass, and I'm like, no, like,
Yes.
let's use it to gather more information. Absolutely. I prefer personally to take people through generational trauma before I take them through past life trauma.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, just because it's also super powerful. Now, in saying that, sometimes, like, again, I don't have, so organicity is one of the principles that I work with that I absolutely love. And so when people come to me, and like, we're not going to have a plan. It's not like, okay, Whitney, like, sure, we're going to understand the things you want to work on, but I don't have a plan for you, because it is just about me guiding you within yourself, and you are going to find your own answers. So if we're doing some guided work and you're in there and you're all like releasing something, and all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, like, I actually feel like I'm a man standing, at the train, but this train is really old, or like, I'm not going to be like, we're not going into past lives, girl, like, get back up here. So like, if it opens up within your system, it is opening up for a reason.
Yes.
And I always respect that. Whatever shows up for the person is way more important than what I think that they need.
Yes. Yeah, that's being intuitively guided and led. And then you, as the person who's facilitating, needs to be intuitively guided, you know, and trust that. I think we need to trust ourselves more. Would you
Absolutely.
agree? Like, I
Uh-huh.
feel like we've been conditioned to not trust and to trust outsiders, who are educated, with our health, with our like our emotions and how to think and how to feel and how to react. It's like we don't trust ourselves as much as we should.
Yeah, and we get into kind of like power dynamics, and like my doctor knows more than me, or my therapist knows more. Like, I always try to create equal level of power in my office, because it is like, and I think that's why I like, you have the answers within you, because when people
Yes.
come to me and they're just like, okay, Lindsay, like, fix me. And again, we joke about it, but I'm like, well, I'm just gonna assist, and you're actually gonna help yourself. You're gonna fix yourself. And so, because it's way more powerful, um and power dynamic gets really icky, and like, I don't want people relying on me thinking that, like, I'm the solution to all their problems,
No.
because I'm not. And all I want to do is keep putting people back within themselves, so they realize that they are the solution to their lives. And it's
Yes.
empowerment, and it's remembering our sense of power that we all intrinsically have. It's the forgetting of that has gotten us in the situations that we're in,
Yeah.
macroly, in our world right now,
Hmm.
right? Like,
Hmm.
the trauma, the layers of ick, that have gotten us into the places that we're in, and so, and yeah, yeah.
Amazing. I love it. I just was listening to a quick little snippet of an interview with Zach Busch, Dr. Zach Busch. He lives in Colorado. You know of him, I know.
I
But it
do.
was on Aubrey Marcus's podcast, and he was saying that we literally have 10,000 more light in our body than the surface of the sun. And the fact that the way that our body just chooses to also express it gives off the sense that we are, human, that we are physical, this appearance, right? But we actually have more ability to process, to generate and process and expel light than even the sun. And I was just thinking about that going, oh my gosh, like we're literally stars. And he says that in the interview, we are stars. And I just was like, gosh, we have so much more ability than we even realize. Like we're so much more powerful than we even give ourselves credit for. And that's the thing with trauma, is it limits you, it makes you small, it diminishes your light, it diminishes your belief in love, your belief in being content, happy, fulfilled, having peace in your life, having abundance coming to you without you doing anything. Like even the whole system of earning money, right? It's not how it's meant to be. It's meant to be a value for value exchange, and just always flowing in and flowing out. It should never be something that is capped or limited, in any way. Like that's not how we were designed to function. But that's the system that's been created that actually creates slavery, that actually causes us to be slaves to our own lives and our own experiences. And so I just love the work that you do, Lindsay, because it goes so deep. It goes to the deepest levels of finding freedom. And I know that's why you're so passionate, because we talk all about like government stuff, political stuff, and we get in the deep, because you are someone who is passionate about people finding freedom. And so any area that you see that binds us, that enslaves us, that limits us, that hinders us, that blocks us, of course you're going to be fiercely passionate about that, because that's literally why you came to the earth, is to unlock that in people individually as well as a collective. I really feel like you have such a bigger vision. That's why you hold, like even breath work classes and things like that, because having more people affected in a positive way of finding true freedom is your purpose, and honestly is your gift. So I love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's
I just made you blush. I love it. See, this is why I love Lindsay, because she's like, oh my. But it's true. And I feel like it needs to be spoken over you for whatever reason. So receive. From one healer to another. I just love your work, and I love your heart too, because it's true. To be honest, what's gonna carry for me, and probably for people who are listening to this, is that the opposite of trauma is choice. I think that just is like, I'm probably gonna make the title that, because it's just so huge that it's trauma is your ability to process life, and where we have trauma is where we have limitation, right? And so anywhere that we're limited, how we can heal that is by making a different choice. So I just love it. So good. So good. So good. So yummy. So thank you so much for sharing. And where can people find you to work with you?
Yeah, so Instagram is a good little spot at this moment. By the time this is live, you can also find me on lindsaymac.ca, and then Instagram is Lindsay_Mac_11, and that's typically the easiest way to get a hold of me. And yeah.
Cool. I'll have everything listed in the show notes for people so they can click on that. Thank you so much for coming again. I can't say it enough. This was amazing, and you're amazing, and such a privilege and an honor to have you on this platform, and to share and spread the love and the light that you have within yourself is just a beautiful thing. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. It was wonderful as always to hang out with you.
Same. I love it. This was so fun.